We are projecting all that is good and beautiful about the Western Cape and the Cape Peninsula in the normal, traditional sense of that word. All that kind of tremendously positive and good stuff that we're forgetting, or we haven't begun to realize that there's a tremendous amount of stuff below all that.
The Western Cape, and Cape Town specifically, could be described as a microcosm of Europe, Asia and Africa. Set in a world-renowned picturesque environment, the different cultural elements as presented to the average tourist seem to be in perfect harmony. But once past the romantic attraction of African curios, the official tourist industry is today confronted with hard-hitting accusations.
When we look at the cultural heritage as portrayed in the tourist brochures, then we can see it has the ideological bias of the white immigrant community. The glaring omission of the cultural contribution of the disadvantaged communities. When I take clients out to any of the places on the itineraries as reflected in the tourist brochures, then there is very little which is reflected, which shows the heritage of the disadvantaged communities.
The people who were involved in running the entire tourist industry in this country were whites, and they couldn't market it from any other perspective except the white perspective.
I like Cape Town. It's a fine city.
While foreign visitors are vitally important to the industry, more and more black people are entering the tourist market. Although those laws which excluded the majority of South Africans from participating in tourism in the past have now been removed from the books, it is easier said than done, with perceptions and imbalances left behind.
We were approached by a person who was organizing a group of Sowetan people to come here. We were delighted to receive them, to welcome them. These were old age pensioners who came down in a group. And we kind of sat up and thought, you know, that's just the tip of an iceberg, and what are we doing about that market, for example? That means, therefore, that's fine to attract them here, but when they arrive here, what then? And that begs the question, do we know what they want? Do we know who they are?
The tourist is shown all this glorification of the old colonial days. It seems that everything started since the coming of Jan van Riebeeck, when he set his feet on the shores here. If one take a look at the South African Museum, where you have the Khoi Khoi, or the Khoi San, the San and the Khoi Khoi, the two different tribes, groups, being portrayed in their kind of natural habitat with them, with the bow and arrow, and then half naked and so on, in together with the whales and together with other animals and so on. And this, as if this was, you know, they were part of this animal world, you know. So any tourist comes here and says, oh, look at these savages. But when you go abroad to Norway, you look at the Viking, you put him next to his ship. There should be some form of affirmative action in terms of taking him out of that glass box, putting him into his proper cultural and historical context.
You know, when you have human cultures on display, on exhibit, those are very powerful messages which are put across, and every individual visitor experiences it slightly differently. But we know that that the impression can be given that we're not really reflecting a true cultural diversity in South Africa, and we have plans to change that. We want to become, to use another well-worn phrase, we want to become more inclusive.
There's acceptance all around that our history books are going to have to be rewritten. And tourism deals with public history, our heritage in the public sphere. And clearly one will have to look, refocus in that area as well. National monuments are massively balanced in favor of old colonial and apartheid rulers, as we know, 97%, as opposed to 3% that reflect the black experience in South Africa. And we need to bring back that the history of all our people in the public sphere as well.
Historian Dr. Howard Phillips has, over several years, and by way of a keen interest in the hidden history of Cape Town, identified various historical sites and events which are not receiving the proper recognition they deserve from the tourist industry. He points out examples such as the Liesbeek River, the first black-white frontier zone in the 17th century, the spot where the slave tree stood, and the building used as a slave lodge, both important reminders of a history hardly mentioned in tourist pamphlets. These are but examples of those places and events near and dear to many of the 3 million Cape Townians in the true fabric of a broader cultural heritage.
We need to give the tourists an introduction into who the people were that were around here before the discovery of South Africa. And there are some places around here, if you look at Table Mountain, if you look at the flats here, if you look at Constantia, if you look at the Liesbeek River, all those places, those are the places that the Khoi lived. Even on this beach here, they walked around here, they made a living out of the sea. And the tourists must have some idea of who these people were.
We've got a very good example right here behind us, St. Stephen's Church. But if you have a look at the historical plaque, the plaque barely mentions the fact that it was a church and makes no mention of the fact that it was the church of the emancipated slaves. And indeed, the very name St. Stephen's Church comes from that fact. After emancipation, when it was being used by the emancipated slaves, the local burghers were so outraged by this that they pelted the windows with stones, and as a result it was given the name St. Stephen's to commemorate the martyr. So here's a very good example of hidden history, how history is there, but to find out both sides of the story, you've got to peel off layers.
We've got to go to communities and give them assistance in planning how they themselves want to participate in tourism. I don't think we're there to prescribe to them. I think most of the communities that are tourist attraction areas already are aware of what they can offer. All they need is direction. All they need is being made aware of how to beneficiate the resources, the natural resources that they have and the tourist attraction that they have.
As far as addressing the imbalances in the present marketing strategy is concerned, the re-evaluation of the history of and historical sites in a tourist destination like the Western Cape is but one element. As is stressed and marketed in so many ways, this city undoubtedly finds itself in one of the most attractive settings in the world. But the mountain, the winelands and the beautiful beaches, it is said, are but one side of a divided Cape Town.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome to the One City Tours. I am Charles Erasmus and this is Paula Gumede. She's my co-presenter and the two of us hope to share the tour with you. Together we hope to explore some very tough and difficult questions for, especially questions facing us as Cape Townians.
The Iziteku Zabantu Tour, or One City Tour, has been operated by IDHASA for the past 4 years. While attracting international tourists, such as political and church groups and interested local individuals, including school tours, the One City Tour is not enjoying the same extent of publicity in the tourist industry as are attractions such as the Whale, Wildflower and other well-known routes.
We take people on to the other side, which Cap Tour and other agencies do not do, but we try and hold the city together as one system and show people how, especially apartheid, has fragmented and broken up the city, and what we have to do to make it one city again.
A tour like this poses not only logistical questions like the safety of the tourist, but also moral ones. Where lies the difference between an introduction to and education of the tourist about the negative and in many cases unknown side of past and present South Africa, and an exploitation of the community's misery and an abusing of people's pride and privacy?
At the beginning, when we started the tour, it was also a very deeply moral and ethical problem to us, because Paula and myself, who are the main presenters on the tour, also come from these oppressed communities. But we resolved it in the following way. All the profit that we make on the tour goes towards the salaries of the tour presenters, covering transport, and donations towards the centers and the people that we visit in these communities. The second way we responded to the communities was to take young people from those communities and empower them by using them on our tours, where they tell their own stories to people who come on the tours.
The Mayebuye Center at the University of the Western Cape could also be described as an alternative attraction. During the past 2 years, this center has provided resources relating to the history of apartheid and resistance to it. It is at present hosting, in conjunction with the South African Natural History Museum, an exhibition on Robben Island, including an insight into the lives of the prisoners who were in detention.
Affirmative action in tourism, there's no doubt that there's a need. If one looks at the foreigner coming into South Africa today, and he has in his mind, synonymous with South Africa is apartheid. So when he comes here, not to show him anything about the struggle against apartheid is being naive. So there is no doubt that as far as that goes, there's a tremendous need to open up, to tell people about District 6, about Crossroads, about the important marches, about Parliament, and show them where all these laws were passed. There's no doubt that there is a need for that.
As is the case with virtually every aspect of South African life today, tourism too will not escape change and adaptation, whether it's called affirmative action, corrective strategy, or more inclusive perspective. An organization like SATUA has now decided on a 5-year time limit to leveling the playing field as far as management, participation, and what is presented to the tourists are concerned.
This is the vision that SATUA has, that we will be able to say to South Africans, black, white, brown, green, yellow, whatever the color, to say to them, open your eyes, look at what God has given you. Look after it and get the maximum out of it.
Within the next few weeks, we're actually calling meetings with the public in the Cape Peninsula, in the Cape Flats, to put this whole concept to them, to hear from them what do they think about tourism, what do they believe tourism is, what it should mean for them.
It's going to take a while for the tourism industry to move away from its old perspectives and stumble along and make some mistakes, but start seeing things from the other person's perspective and from the black man's perspective, and how South Africa should be portrayed.
Our dream and our goal to host the Games here is not just a fanciful whim of ego. That we're very serious about that, and we believe that's precisely the goal that we have in mind. The Games being staged here will have the effect of creating tremendous material well-being for our people, but will also have the effect of uniting our people in a common cause, namely the interests of the city and our people.
We are going to have to invest tremendously in educating our people, changing their attitudes, showing them that we can live together, removing the fears that we have, and showing them that violence does not help. All this will need education. It will need the ability to communicate, the ability to penetrate reservations that have been created over 40 years.